Welcome to Voices of Integrity. And today we're going to be going through the podcast on the blackout principle. And to understand the blackout principle, it's when we ask a question and there's no response. Like people just freeze up, and they can do this verbally in person, although it's harder for somebody in person to black out. But they can do it in emails, they can do it, otherwise as well. But to understand the blackout principle, we have to understand another principle. And that principle is the next dimension principle. And so the next dimension principle is what's a higher number, a 2 or a 9. Most people will say, well, of course, Mark, a 9 is higher. And why is that? It's because we think in one dimension, which is the dimension we're in. But if there's 10 levels in a dimension, and if you've heard this before and you black out, maybe if you didn't black out, maybe if there was some humility, maybe if there was truly a deep desire for a deep relationship, and we're willing to do the hard work and make the sacrifice and take the risk, maybe we could hear something we haven't heard in the past. So if there's 10 levels in a dimension, once we get a 10 to a 10, 10 is not perfection, it's masteries. So we go to the next dimension. And in the next dimension, a 2 in the next dimension is actually higher than a 9 in the previous dimension. So if we go ahead and look at, how to develop deep relationships, is this ongoing? Like, what is a deep relationship? Having clarity on that is going to be important. Now, when we look at the different pieces in the dimensions and based on the 4 personalities, the cheerleading dimension is going to be the basic dimension. This is when we go to a new dimension. You never see a toddler where a toddler gets up and falls, and then people say, you'll never walk again in your life. But that's how we are with adults. Where when we try something new, others, you'll never walk again. Yeah, you're not good at that. So a cheerleader is an encourager. It's very powerful for people making breakthroughs in next dimension. But the dark side of that is it can create entitlement. What do you mean, Mark? Thanks for asking. It's because feelings are addictive, as is validation, especially to certain personalities. So where the more feeling I get, the more I want. And we learn how to use feelings to manipulate other people to get what we want, which could be attention, or could be control, could be power, it could be feelings, it could be anything. And validation, the more validation we get, the more we want. Now, the next dimension is the teacher dimension. And so the cheerleader is the amiable, it's the ball or, conflict with others. Everybody loves a cheerleader because a cheerleader just tells you everything you want to hear. The cheerleaders don't say, you're a terrible team. They're always cheering you. Even if you're a loser, they're cheering you. And that can go ahead and actually harm somebody because you can actually buy into what the cheerleader's saying, that you're amazing when you're really not. You could be amazing. You're just not doing the work you need to be. The teacher is the next level. And this is where when you get into a new dimension, all the rules change. So if you're an 11-year-old boy, for instance, when you were, 2 or 3, when you were 2 or 3 years old, you could act up and you could be the class clown and you could get a lot of attention. And that attention, people laugh and everything. But when you turn 11, it's not so funny anymore because you're just always seeking attention. So people won't want to be your friends. Now, the good news is if you don't change, just wait until you're, over 50 and you become an uncle. Well, then you can be that way and everybody will love you because you're just fun. You're just a funny person. And so, there's seasons in life that you shift back and forth. So the teacher teaches you and says, hey, you may not want to be the center of attention always, because if you do, people aren't going to want to be around you. And so the teacher teaches you different types of things in this new dimension. This is how you need to behave differently. And when you behave differently, you'll have friends, or you'll have deep friends rather than just superficial surface friends. The coach is the level 3, and that moves, so that moves you where it's like a football coach, and they'll cheerlead you and tell you you're doing great. They'll kick you in the tail. They'll teach you. They'll do the different things. They'll bench you if you're not doing it. So they can be hard. They can be soft. This is the one that I struggle the most with. I struggle with the cheerleader too, because I'm concerned that it creates entitlement, narcissistic, self-centered, self-absorbed people. Because they're just, that's what my concern is. So I can encourage people as good as anybody else. It's just, I'm not sure if that's really what people need. I'm really good, I think, at the teacher. I'm terrible at the coach. Terrible. I just, But where my greatest strength probably is in the Navy SEALs. And this is if somebody wants to make a breakthrough. They want to go to the next dimension. Now, they often won't like me because I'm going to tell them things that they don't want to hear. And when I tell them things they don't want to hear, they're going to black out. And so they won't like me. But often what I find is they'll love me, because they'll look back sometime in the future and say, Mark was the only person who cared. He really did care. He put the whole relationship at risk. Now, when we look at this, you can tell like this guy's given this some thought. Like it's not some random thing. So this is, I think this is Micaiah. Nope, this is Elena. So when she's just a little baby, you get the cheerleader, everything she does, she yawns. Oh my gracious, she yawned. Get a picture of that. She blinked her eyes, she smiled, even if it's gas, it doesn't matter. Anything's positive. So we like people who tell us what we want to hear. The next is Micaiah. She's the big sister. And so we value people who teach us the things that we value. And so right now she's talking about love. And so she's so cute. The next is going to be the twins and Lily. So the twins, I think they were 2 and 3 years old. And that's when they became a bit sassy. They're not, so they change, they shift. They're not the sweet little, they'll actually like, Grandpa, I don't love you anymore. Okay. And then we move into the next dimension. Do we value people who challenge us? And often we don't. And then the Navy SEALs, and this is the 2 grandsons, Daniel and Trevor. And these 2 guys, I'm telling you, absolutely amazing. But they're moving into their teenage years, and the dimensions have to change. So they mouth off to their mom or dad or their grandpa, or maybe their cousins or somebody else, and they might not get socked in the mouth and decked. Their grandpa's going to love them no matter what. He just will. That's what grandpas do. But other people may not. Grandpa will always be a friend. But you know what? Will he be a deep friend? That's a choice they get to make, and grandpa gets to make as well. So do we embrace people who see and share what we really are? Do we eliminate those in our lives who care more for us as an individual than care for the relationship? Interesting, right? So we often deceive ourselves into thinking we care for somebody. That's why I'm not going to tell them the truth. Interesting, right? And so dimensional, we have fears. And so what moves us forward in relationships or anything is faith, see, understand, do, humility, great stewardship, contentment, self-discipline, perspective, strong life vision. What holds us back is fear. We do not see, lack understanding, do not do, pride, poor stewardship, lust of the eyes, lust of flesh, low morale, lukewarm. Now, this is a fractal. So these are fractals. We can go up or can go down, like a snowflake is a fractal. And so there's a science behind all of this. And if you ask the story sometime on a podcast, like, where did this all come from? It's the coolest story in the world. It actually is driven based on humility. And so when we look at the blackout principle, this is where we're at, right here, wherever we are in whichever dimension. The next level is the sweet spot. This is where it feels good, the amiable. The amiable has this ability, often moms or grandmothers, or, the amiable definitely, it feels good. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a benefit to doing that without question. Where someone says that's a great question, where someone is looking for the answers. Then we go ahead, and this is the hazard. This is the hard zone. This is where the 9Ds to destruction kick in. Distract, divide, defer, deflect, defend, defensive, deny, destroy, deceive, disguise equals defeat and depression. But I can just go to, some therapist and they will medicate that. No, the medication will deal with the symptom. It will not deal with the heart, the core. So this is where the life zone is, where life often takes us. It's beyond the hard zone. Like, in my experience, way beyond the hard zone. And this is the blackout. This is like hitting the runner's wall. We get stuck. We feel like quitting and often give up and do not make the breakthroughs. When the 9Ds to destruction kick in, why? Because people either say something we do not want to hear or may ask questions that we don't like, and we black out. Why? Because it's complicated, right? So this is where fear kicks in. It's in the dimensional gap. In the dimensional gap, we have fear. We like it where we're at. We feel safe. We feel good. We feel in control. We feel like we're having fun, but there is something missing. And so if we don't understand this, then we often slide back into where we were. So we have emotions like fear and overwhelm and locked and intimidation and hurt and anger. This is why people black out. Does it all come down to ego? Where we can't say, that's a great question. Like, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what's going on inside of me. I can't even tell you how much I love. I adore watching my adult daughters with their kids, especially when they're 1 and 2. It is the cutest thing in the world. I don't remember my kids being that cute. I'm sure they were. I don't remember seeing things like I see now. Like when Trevor and Daniel, I think, were maybe, I don't know, 3 and 1-year-old, and we traveled back Pennsylvania, and we stopped at rest stops, and I was terrified of Daniel running out in front of a car. So I held on to him like crazy. And I remember Ginger Ann and I was driving, and the boys were fussing in the back seat. And they were angry and they were upset. And Ginger Ann very carefully, very cautiously, very gently as a mom. And I've seen this with all 4 of my daughters, even my youngest daughter, who does not have children, but I've seen it with her with other children. And it just touches my heart as a man, as a dad, where Ginger Ann said, honey, mom can't understand what you want. You have to use your words. Are adults any better than a 1 or 2-year-old? Maybe not. Like, we get all these emotions and we just We black out. And we don't go into the humble mode and say, why am I feeling what I'm feeling? We don't have an out-of-body experience and say, interesting. We don't even respond often. We just black out. And then we blame the person that asked the question or said what they said or shared what they shared. We blame that person because it's a lot easier to blame somebody else for our own stuff than it is for us to take ownership. So the world seems to be degenerating into more entitlement, more self-righteousness, and more victim. The vaccine for those three things is, for entitlement, it's thankfulness. Always being thankful. For self-righteousness, it's being humble. We're not nearly as smart or as good as we think we are. Or caring or loving or whatever. We're not as good as a friend as we think we are. And for victimhood, it's taking ownership. It's learning to take ownership. So hopefully this short podcast was helpful to you. I'd encourage you to share it with other people. People who black out often, I wonder if they're manipulating, if they're leveraging, even if they don't think they like leverage. They don't use leverage. Like they decide not to respond to punish the person who said something, to force that person into a submissive role and say, you know what, I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to interact with you. And that seems to work, I guess, pretty effective on 3 out of the 4 personalities. I'll let you decide which of the 3 or 4 might be. So if you have any questions, connect with the individual, have a conversation, whether you agree with it, don't agree with it. That's not the point. The point is, have a conversation, because that's what these podcasts for Voices of Integrity is all about. Hope this has been helpful. Have an amazing day. Bye.